Welcome to Freethinker Radio on KPFT Houston. We're glad to be here. I'm Micah Jackson with my friends Derrick and Johnny. We're social distancing in 3 different locations, multiple nations. We're having a lot of fun. We've been enjoying this, and we thank KPFT and you for letting us have this opportunity. So, guys, how you been? What's going on, Derrick?
Oh, man, it's just another week for me here in Mexico. Just same thing as last week, man. Things are pretty chill out here. I went on a bike ride today. I went to the fruit stand today, ordered some food, went out and enjoyed the sun. Things have been pretty calm. Things haven't gotten crazy. There's no crazy increase of cases. I'm seeing more masks. I think I told you last week, one guy yelled at me for not wearing a mask while I was biking around. But other than that, things have been pretty chill. But yeah, what about you, Johnny? How are things going for you and your side of Houston?
I'm doing well. The sun's been shining and our garden has been growing pretty well. Just living that quarantine life a little bit, painting our shed and that kind of stuff. We're all excited to start putting on events. So hopefully, we see some more openings in Texas soon, or, people start thinking it's safe to come out.
Yeah, exactly. For those who are new and haven't listened before, this is Freethinker Radio. We do this once a week on KPFT, 90.1 KPFT in Houston, where some of you will be listening to this on a Friday afternoon. But we're also doing it live right now on Facebook at Freethinker Radio, the Houston Freethinkers, the Derrick Bros page, the Conscious Resistance Network page, and on YouTube at the Conscious Resistance. So we're going to be playing music. We're going to be covering. We got one big Houston story that we want to follow up. But actually today, this is the first time that the 3 of us have just been brainstorming the last couple weeks about how to make the show better and how to improve it and make it more timeless. And so we're going to kind of go with the theme today, and we're going to be talking about the government agency known as DARPA that some of you have probably heard about over the years, and I know we've done stories about over the years. But today, once we get into that, we're going to talk about their history. We're going to talk maybe about some of the hidden history, and we'll get into some of the weirdest projects that DARPA has been involved with in the second half of the episode. But right now, if you guys can hear us on any of the places we mentioned, or if you're listening to us live, please let some people know, share this with your friends, and follow our pages and all that good stuff. But guys, did you see this, Micah? Remember we mentioned this last week about this this cop shooting that was going on, and we were kind of like, well, we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle yet, so let's not rush to judgment. But we did talk about how the Free Thought Project had reported, and they were the only outlet. Nobody in Houston reported on this. It had to be an independent media outlet, the Free Thought Project. They reported that there was a video that had been released showing, from the neighbor's viewpoint, showing this man in Houston being basically executed by HPD on his knees after they claimed he had some kind of weapon or charged at them. So that video went out there. We talked about it. And since that time, on April 30th, almost 2 weeks ago now, HPD Chief Art Acevedo addresses the video showing the fatal shooting of a kneeling man. So they actually did acknowledge that it happened, and that it appears to show police unleashing a barrage of gunfire at Nicholas Chavez, 27 years old, who was on his knees. And of course, this is after he was apparently tased and hit with beanbag rounds, and he still was not going down, and he was on his knees though. But the cops, they claimed, just like they claimed in the Tuttle's cases, and they claimed like other things, that the guy charged at him. Thankfully, one of the neighbors videotaped that on their cell phones, and it just goes to show, I think, the power of cell phones and really social media. But what do you think about that, Micah and Johnny? Just kind of a follow-up to what we talked about. Like, it does indeed seem that the video was accurate, man, that this guy was executed on his knees.
It at least seems like, they shot him once before he was on his knees, or at least from the video is what it looked like. And then he fell on his knees and he was just kind of flailing around. But 4 officers against 1, he did have a, probably decently long, sharp object, but you would still think that maybe 2 people can come at him from the back, or, I'm sure there should be some kind of other procedure than just open fire on this dude on his knees. And they also claimed, not sure if it was that article or another one I read, but they claimed that he was attempting suicide by cop, which I also just thought was an interesting idea in and of itself, that like, how is that an option for people just to like, oh, well, I'm going to force these cops to, kill me. So that's just an interesting idea that people thought about it. What do you think, Micah?
I think it's very difficult given the history of the police throughout the world, the history of the police in Houston. And as you mentioned earlier, the Tuttles, this is recent news. We still have the same police chief. We have a lot of the same officers. And it's difficult, obviously not being there. I hate to take that line a little bit, but at the same time, that's where, they get a foot in saying, you don't know what happened. You don't know how dangerous it is. And what Johnny said is maybe we should have some different policies or procedures. And I think a lot of times some people may say, what do you know? You're not a cop. You don't face the dangers, et cetera. And discount that altogether, which I find disgusting, because in a free nation, these sort of things and the policies and procedures that we want to police our lands with are kind of in our hands. No, we're not out there facing it. That's why we hired you to take that risk, and they get paid very well. So if we want, as Johnny said, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Derrick, something different, then we're entirely within our rights to discuss it, to ask for it. And these people that give that other argument back, I think I wanted to spend a moment on that, because, anytime you bring up the minority argument, for lack of a better word, you get a lot of collectivists hitting you back with those same tired arguments from authority. And I just wanted to be able to address that a little bit.
Yeah, Johnny, I want to respond to something you said, and that we have a comment here from YouTube. Cheryl says, it happens more than you think. Suicide by cop, not taking up for cops. I don't know all the facts, but I do think it is true that there's some people who do go out. Yeah, I mean, it definitely happens where, like, if you're somebody who's psychotic or losing your mind or suicidal or whatever, I mean, obviously people realize if you go at a cop in a violent way, they're probably going to shoot you. I'm not saying it would be justified or anything of that sort, but it definitely, that phrase, suicide by cop, it's weird to hear HPD Chief Art Acevedo say it, but it is, considered a phrase. But the interesting thing, though, Johnny, again, I'm getting the same feeling with the Tuttles. And of course, we got to wait to see what happens. But in the beginning, he said it was suicide by cop. This guy was outrageous. He had a knife on him. Well, it went from he had a gun to he had a knife to he had a 2-inch piece of rebar. Like, so the story's changing and evolving, right? It went to like, he charged at us, and now the picture shows he's getting shot. Like, there was, like you said, Johnny, he got shot once, and then he seemed to fall to his knees.
I just think so it should be a little bit harder to commit suicide by cop. That should not be like, easy, unfortunately. But yeah, like, I definitely believe that happens, and that some people might be able to push a cop to that point.
I got a little spot there on that suicide by cop thought, because, we've been hearing that phrase for a while, and I think it, it's one of those things that, like, it just becomes a script to, say occasionally. But I think it's also part of the mental illness problem in this country. And if you think about the rage and the anger that it must take for an individual to go out and want to die, or the misery for them to want to die and to want to force the hand of someone else to kill them rather than to commit suicide. I just think it's an interesting mental state that these individuals have to be in. And I think that in itself, I'm not trying to say that, we need to cater to the crazies or something, but I think it's something about the society that would create people that would go out to get killed by cops. You see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, the fact that we live in a society where that's a thing, like that. Well, for one, that it's almost a given that if you do come at a cop in a sort of aggressive way, that they're probably going to shoot you. Unfortunately, that seems to be a given, to the point that the phrase suicide by cop has become a thing. But, also that we live in a society where people, whatever's going on with them, that they feel that badly about life, that they would just want to go get taken out by a cop. But yeah, you guys are listening to Freethinker Radio on YouTube, Facebook, and 90.1 KPFT Houston. We've been doing this since 2011 now, Micah, and with Johnny for the last couple years. And we're very thankful to everybody who tunes in, who listens, who shares and subscribes. Of course, we are part of the Conscious Resistance Network. You can find all of our archives at theconsciousresistance.com or at our website, which is thehoustonfreethinkers.com. That I'll show you guys real quick if you're watching. And we're here on a weekly basis. And as I said before, as we kind of wrap up that Houston story, we've got a big topic for today, guys. Johnny is going to really lead things off here in a moment, but we're going to be talking about DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, part of the Department of Defense, or the Department of War, if you prefer, responsible for emerging technologies for use by the military. So that's just, the basic background from Wikipedia. And Johnny's going to give us some more background on what he found. And each of us, we're going to be sharing, like I said, our favorite crazy things coming out of DARPA. And there's a lot of crazy ones. We're going to be talking about how this relates to COVID-19 towards the end of the show. And we're going to be talking about their background. But go ahead, Johnny, and share with everybody just some of what you found. And we'll see what we can pull out of this.
Okay, well, most of this information I just basically found off of DARPA's own YouTube, and if you're bored, I'd recommend just searching through there. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. But DARPA was basically a advanced research program, which was started in like 1958 under Eisenhower, and this is advertised really as a response to the Russians launching Sputnik, the missile or the satellite in space that was rocket powered, and this supposedly scared a lot of American intelligence, and we decided that kind of started this race for technology. And DARPA's main focus in the beginning was advertised as get us to space, protect us from Soviet missiles, and detect nuclear tests. So just with those first couple of things, these guys were really on the track to invent a lot of modern day technologies that we have now. So they would go on to use, geology and seismology to start detecting submarines on radars and explosions in the sky and under the earth. And they were trying to launch their own satellites. They would eventually go on to, in 1966, which I didn't remember, or I didn't mention earlier, but they weren't always DARPA. They used to be ARPA without the D. And while they were still ARPA, they invented something called the ARPANET, now known as the Internet. And they were pretty much the first people to connect computers together and try to make them start communicating. So it's just crazy that that's where, it kind of began. Not a lot of people know that. They made the first router. They would go on to develop they would start moving away from the space stuff and kind of take that over to NASA. And during the Cold War in the 70s and the 80s, they were more focused on military technologies. And a lot of their focus was actually to spend as much money as possible because, like I said earlier, they're in this race with Russia. So this whole time where we're developing these technologies, Russia is trying to keep up with us. They're seeing these intelligent missiles coming out, and they're trying to spend as much money as they can. So the U.S. was attempting to bankrupt Russia through just spending as much money on these projects as possible. So they were investing in stealth planes that can fly higher, planes that can fly longer, and yeah, projects Star Wars, and that's just really some of the beginnings of it. So they invented GPS and a lot of modern day technologies that we know now. You guys familiar with some of those?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, Johnny. You're talking about how ARPANET helped create, or ARPA helped create the ARPANET, which is basically the predecessor to the modern internet, as everybody here knows it. And you also mentioned GPS. If I remember correctly, DARPA was also involved with, well, obviously GPS for weather positioning systems. I believe that they also helped develop some of the first cellular networks. And they are, for those who are maybe listening and never heard of DARPA, again, that's DARPA. You can look them up and you find a lot of different things. We're going to save the weird stuff for the second half of the show, but you find a lot of weird projects that DARPA has been involved. I'm just going to read a little bit from this page, Johnny, from the DARPA.mil website. It says, our research, they talk about, they have a podcast if you want to get more and learn what they're about. It says Voices from DARPA get a window into their program managers who discuss their informal and personal terms of what they are up to at DARPA. And then, of course, DARPA says that they are accelerating the third wave, the next wave of investments into developing contextual reasoning and artificial intelligence systems to improve human-machine learning or teaming. And just, for, I guess, a simple way for somebody who's never heard of DARPA is basically the place when you think of Terminator and Matrix and dystopia, world gone wrong, Skynet type stuff. DARPA is the agency that helps bring all those things into existence, apparently. Micah, you and I have mentioned and talked about DARPA over the years. What are your initial thoughts, I guess, on how it's just grown and continued to proliferate over the years?
I'm not surprised, given, I guess, how many people there are in the country, how much money they have access to, secret budgets, things like that, and how many people there are that just believe that all of this is good. All of this is for the better. Even in the history when Johnny's speaking about Russia, how they built up the fears of Russia to the point where they were able to justify these things, like he said, protect us from Soviet missiles, things like this, Yet there's lots of studies that said, why did we have to do this? What sort of situation created that? And I just think that a lot of the collective groupthink type thing allows this stuff to go on, that if people slow down and they look at it, they'll say, well, I don't mind having robot security guards and stuff like that. Why should people get shot? And there's some interesting technology, because that's just know-how. Like a drone we've talked about before, Derrick and Johnny, I know y'all remember. We've said things like drones could be used either way. They could deliver food to hungry people, or your Amazon package, or our pizza at Free Thinker Radio on KPFT, or they can be used to wipe out Yemen. Basically. So I think DARPA, it must be very attractive to creative technical minds because the budget that's available. And obviously they can go and recruit kids through like these robot simulator wars, all these different things. So I imagine it has a lot of gravitas, a lot of pull. Yet at the same time, it doesn't have a lot of pushback, a lot of questions. Yes, within people who do question and have concerns about the wars and CIA and stuff, the word DARPA comes up. But how often do we go further into it and see their agenda? So I'm glad we're spending the time on this, and I hope that kind of points some direction.
Another thing I wanted to mention was like I saw in I think it was one of those videos, they basically were focusing their attention on new technology for uses that haven't been thought of yet. That's kind of like, so they're trying to operate completely in the realm of the unknown. Like they're trying to fix problems that haven't come up yet, and totally in this futurist mentality, always about 20 years ahead or so. So who knows what they have right now.
I think that's a good point, Johnny, because a lot of times we do feel like there's a lag, and that we're hearing about technologies and things where it's sort of like a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if we go back to the 19th century, read Jules Verne, Captain Nemo and submarines and hot air balloons and people going to Mars and stuff. Yeah, it makes sense that the human imagination would just come up with these things, right? And then certain scientists and certain people who look at natural science and figure out the ways to control forces start working towards that. I just think that it's difficult because we believe to some degree that this funding comes from us, and we don't know where all the funding comes from. I'm sure there's a lot of black budget ops. So we also got to ask, who has control over DARPA? Who assigns DARPA projects? Also, what happens to our corporations and other private entities able to take advantage of the resources and the things that have come out of DARPA? Because in a sense, if for example, maps and things that are generated by the government are public domain knowledge, right? So if DARPA patents something, who owns that? Like if DARPA creates a new technology, if DARPA creates better Terminators, why wouldn't these Terminators be available to all the American people? Just like a map that was made by the government or any document that was created by the government. So you got to ask yourself, who owns DARPA? Who controls DARPA? We think of it as an American thing, protecting us from all these monsters. I don't know, just kind of waxing on that a bit.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. They just stay far ahead, and there's not a lot of oversight and questions if you're solving problems that haven't happened yet. So they're just trying to predict different things, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else to say before we get too far into the weirdness with sometimes their chips and their and mind control things. I saw someone commented about them blasting things into the ionosphere. They actually did have a project early on of trying to build a force field around the Earth by launching like I can't remember exactly what it was. They tried to launch some kind of material and surround the Earth.
One thing I think
that would
is
protect us from, supposed nuclear attacks or something like that. But it was obviously not feasible. But those
one
are the
thing
kind of things they're messing with.
One thing I think is interesting that you just brought up, Johnny, is how they're ahead in the future and they're creating, scenario, trying to think up scenarios that haven't occurred yet. It's interesting because it does seem like the bulk of the scenarios involve violence and war and control. They're not thinking of, see what I'm saying? Their scenarios almost are script. Like, you get what I mean? They don't seem to, they're thinking outside a box.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're just following their curiosity, I suppose, at a certain point.
Well, hey, I want to kind of touch on a little bit of what you said, Johnny.
Okay.
Johnny, I want to follow up with some of what you said when you were doing some background on DARPA, just because I know we're coming up to a music break here in just a few minutes. For those who are listening, again, this is Freethinker Radio. We'll be airing on 90.1 KPFT Houston. So Johnny gave us the sort of official version of what DARPA puts out there, but there's also a couple of other investigations that we're not going to have time to fully dive into today, but are at least worth mentioning so our audience is familiar with them. And one of them is this Quartz article coming from QZQuartz.com, and it was written a couple of years ago, but it's a very, very well researched article, and it's just titled "Google's True Origin Partly Lies in the CIA and NSA Research Grants for Mass Surveillance." And when you search DARPA on here, it gets into DARPA, and it talks about how the intelligence community and scientists have a long history of working together, including with DARPA and the starting of the internet, as we discussed. And how Silicon Valley was no different. By the mid-1990s, the intelligence community was seeding funding to the most promising supercomputing efforts across academia, guiding the creation of efforts to make mass amounts of information useful for both the private sector as well as the intelligence community. And this is pretty much what led to Google. And it says they funded these computer scientists through an unclassified, highly compartmentalized program that was managed by the CIA and the NSA for large military and intelligence contractors. And it goes on a little further. This project was called Massive Digital Data Systems, MDDS project, and it was introduced to several dozen leading computer scientists at Stanford, Caltech, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, and others in a white paper that described what the CIA, the NSA, and DARPA and other agencies were hoping to achieve. And the research would be funded and managed by an unclassified science agencies such as the NSF, and would fund the architecture to be scaled up if the private sector managed to achieve what the intelligence community had hoped for. So basically what that's describing is through this massive digital data systems project, the US intelligence community were funding projects, they were putting out white papers and working with some of the smartest computer scientists around the country. And once they saw a company that was basically up to scale to the technology that they already had, then they would collaborate with them and help the private sector kind of scale up and see if they could do things like, for example, use a search engine to gather everything about everybody's interest, or social media companies that can tell you about where people go and what they're interested in. And the founders of Google, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they have connections to DARPA. This article goes, I'll post this link to everybody who's watching and listening, but if you're listening, you can just look up Google's True Origin Lies with the CIA and NSA research grants. And then just one other aside for those who have time to dive into a book these days, look up the book Surveillance Valley, The Secret Military History of the Internet. And it goes even further. It's by Yasha Levine. It's a really great book. And again, it talks about how DARPA, the CIA, NSA, using sometimes their venture firm In-Q-Tel, would help fund projects like Google, search engines. Like you said, Johnny, they helped create the first GPS. They also helped create the first search engines. They also helped create the first cellular technology. There's just so many different ways that DARPA has been ahead of the game.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting you mentioned them just going with the private sector, because they actually did have, I think it was them that held the first competition for self-driving cars. And they have had other events like it to, help speed up, I guess, their own innovation. They're outsourcing, smart engineers and having these contests, I'm sure, to move themselves ahead as well. But yeah, I just thought that was an interesting point that they do those contests, and they've done them they did that way back in 2003, I think. And that's,
Yep. And we're going to get into some more of these, like what these contests, they had a robot contest. We're going to show you guys video on that who are watching. We got weird stuff coming up, but Micah, let's go to a song. I know you had one set up. We're going to hear from Darwins Finches, I think, right?
Oh yeah. Always love to hear Darwin's Finches.
Okay, cool. We're going to go
Houston band.
Darwins Finches. What is this?
This is a new song of theirs that I just got.
Cool. Well, let's do it. This is Sanitary Lanny. All right, well, let's go ahead and do it then. Let's play this. Guys, all right, you're listening to Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston. We will be right back after this short song. Stay tuned.
Sanitary Lane is so spicky and span. Sanitary Lane has a glove on his hand. Sanitary Lane is so spicky and span. Sanitary Lane has a glove on his hand. A glove on his hand. A glove on his hand. Sanitary Lane has a glove on. Friend, did you and he sets up cardboard boxes, shooting them with his gun. Sanitary Lane drove a truck. He drove a truck around the country when he was young. Has a wife. She left him a long time ago. Doesn't give a damn anymore. Sanitary Lane begins fan. Sanitary Lane has a glove on his hand. He has a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Sanitary Lane has a glove on his hand. Doing donuts with his gas-powered golf cart in the parking lot late at night. Sanitary Lanny doesn't sleep. Sanitary Lanny will not bite. Sanitary Lanny keeps it clean. Sanitary Lanny keeps it nice. That's his job. Better not get in his way or he will move you out of the way and clean you up. Sanitary Lanny's so spaghetti and span. Sanitary Lanny has a glove on his hand. Sanitary Lanny's so spaghetti and span. Sanitary Lanny has a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Sanitary Lanny has a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Sanitary Lanny has a glove on his hand. Sanitary Lanny has a glove on his hand. Glove on his hand. Glove on his hand.
All right. I really, that was fun. We've had Darwin Clay in before on the show. He's been a guest before. He's definitely an interesting Houston musician and artist, plays the full band as well, has a lot of different sounding music out there that you can get into.
Kind of like Primus a little bit. Sanitary Larry, that's awesome. Come on. We all need a little bit of Sanitary Larry. Me too, Lisa.
No doubt.
That was pretty trippy. Let's do
the next episode in Claymation.
All right.
I like that. Is Derrick frozen?
All right. Yeah, so many artists are doing things. It's nice to be able to share some, and I kind of like his tongue-in-cheek approach to it.
All right, well, let's continue our talk on DARPA. Guys, if you're just tuning in, this is Freethinker Radio. We're covering everything DARPA.
Looks like
Are we having dead air here?
we're having some technical difficulties. Sorry, you guys.
So what did you think as you were doing the research on DARPA? Like, as this stuff did you think it was?
I thought that I didn't have enough time to do all this research because there's just so much this agency has covered. It's kind of unbelievable.
There he is.
Robots, helicopters.
Yo, robots, helicopters. You want to see some of the video, Johnny? Should we show them the video of these?
We're talking
these
about how
robots?
it's overwhelming. How much?
It is a little overwhelming. I mean, how would you feel if you saw this guy running at you? Where is he at?
The little
One of
robot
these
dog?
guys. Not even the robot dog. That guy is pretty light compared to the Jaguar. And some of these aren't all DARPA. Some of them are with them working with other companies.
There's going to
alone,
be
but
a
you can see
robot
this one.
Tiger King.
Look at this. 6 months ago, it was posted. New robot makes soldiers obsolete. And look at this crazy thing. Then you can see this one. This was actually from DARPA's 2015 robotics challenge. Here, I'm going to play a little bit of the clip for those who are watching, and you can just see this robot coming through the door. I mean, imagine, Johnny, we're talking about shootings in people's homes with the tunnels and these sort of things. I mean, this is the next level, though, where you've got a freaking robot like this drilling into your home. And I mean, it's going to be kind of hard to appeal for sympathy or empathy from a non-human entity like that as we move into that. But that's just, I guess, the tip of it. I did a search, Johnny, using the CIA's Google, and this is all the things that pop up with DARPA related to robots. I mean, creepy DARPA robots. This is going back to 2013. People were writing about these robots. 2012, 2013, 2020.
Well, it's not just the robots. They're trying to combine the robots with biological things. You know, that's one of the creepiest things, I think, because they're not just about like the future of robots. They want to make us part robot, and that sounds weird, but it's. I mean, I sent you some of those articles.
That's one of the leading things they're studying now is how to get the brain to interface with the machinery.
And honestly, this isn't necessarily DARPA, but I mean, Tesla was just on Joe Rogan talking about that, drilling out a piece of your skull and inserting
the Neuralink.
A Neuralink, yeah. So it's kind of very similar to a lot of the stuff that DARPA is talking about, and like being able to they've been successfully able to
this
rats and
yeah, I mean, this whole world, dude, it's the technocracy. This is the technocracy coming into view, and the biggest, most influential people are the Zuckerbergs, the Bezos, the Elon Musks, all the people of these huge tech companies that have so much data and have immense influence. And they're also doing, like you said, not only studying the Neuralink inside the human brain, like Elon Musk just told Joe Rogan, but you also have DARPA, and this is one of the ones you sent, Johnny. You want to tell us about this? Robo-rat controlled by brain electrodes?
Okay.
What the heck is going on in this?
So there's a lot of questions ethically with this, because essentially it's, so they say they're technically not using mind control, but they're providing the brain with stimulus in certain areas, as you can see on the screen there. So certain areas of stimulus will cause the rat to kind of have an effect as if you were to, they say dangle a carrot in front of a donkey. So it kind of makes them just have the, I guess, want or desire to move forward. And they can also manipulate that to make them move left and right. And I don't know if you can pull up the other article, but there's another experiment they did on rats where they are controlling rats' brains over the internet, and they're actually linking rats' brains. Let me see if I say it's cool that the stimulus came from another brain rather than an electrical device. Many labs have shown that animals can detect electrical stimuli delivered to the brain. This paper simply shows that animals can detect electric stimuli. So it's basically saying that these rats with computer chips in their brains are able to feel each other's movements, and they end up mirroring each other from across the globe.
Yeah, and we should say this was 7 years ago, dude. That story that we just looked at was 7 years ago.
And that's what we know they were working on.
And it clearly says that this is referred to as a brain link. Now, of course, Elon Musk is calling it a Neuralink, but the connection is obviously there. $26 million study of brain-machine interfaces funded by DARPA, which ultimately hopes to have this technology available to humans. And of course, on this show, we believe in freedom and bodily autonomy. So if you want to become a transhumanist, implant your brain, download the internet, become part of the Borg or the Hive, that's your freedom to do so. But I think that what we're trying to discuss is of course, exposing DARPA and this agency that's been using, here's another point, taxpayer dollars to do all kinds of crazy hidden projects and mixing animals and experimenting with rats. And we got another one you sent me, Johnny, about a moth. But that this agency is really pushing into some very dangerous directions that, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really make me feel very safe about the future of human beings living in this crazy, chaotic world. And as we're going to discuss in a few moments, this actually is connecting to the COVID-19 crisis. DARPA is getting a big boost in funding and support at the moment. Johnny, but you want to talk about this next one with the moth thing? This is I never seen this one before.
Yeah, without going too crazy on it, I mean, I heard some people talking about like, oh, they could remote control a moth, which I thought was interesting because how the hell are you going to fit a microchip inside of a moth's brain? That would be really small. But what they actually did was they got what they called the program Hybrid Insect Micro Electro Mechanical Systems. That's Hybrid Insect Micro Electro Mechanical Systems. And yeah, they basically have a computer chip that they grow a moth around. So they implant it into the larva, and during the cocoon stages, the moth's brain and body actually grows around it, and then they're able to control it that way via remote control or internet stimuli. Did I lose both of them? And you back?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry about that, man. Yeah,
Okay.
you were talking.
Yeah, I just said they grew. I just said they grew the moth around a computer chip. Basically, I don't know what happened to Micah. This is our first time using this system, guys. So.
Well, look, I got that right here. It says, this is crazy. Again, this is 2007, so 14 years ago. They're using a system called Hybrid Insect Microelectric Mechanical System. In it, the arguably over-caffeined DARPA is aiming to construct a tiny Lepidopteran infiltration Borg by growing a living moth around a micromechanical system. One of the program's managers says, the animal world has provided mankind with locomotion over millennia. For example, we have used horses and elephants. This program is aimed at developing technology that provides more control over insect locomotion, such as saddles and horseshoes are needed for horse locomotion control. So they're trying to saddle up and ride a moth or, the insect for spy purposes, basically, it sounds like.
And they're also, I think it's supposed to be for listening device, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and again, those who've heard the name, who know that the MIT lab is also one of the places working on these kinds of things. It says Rod Brooks of MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab said, quote, "This is going to happen. It's not science like developing the nuclear bomb, which costs billions of dollars. It can be done relatively cheap." He says, once the moth hatches, the machine learning is used to control it. Biological engineering is coming. And he went, so basically they're saying it's coming. I mean, this is happening. This is a very real thing.
Yeah, it's definitely here. It's weird. Hopefully.
Well, let me I'm back. Let me show a couple of weird experiments.
Micah.
Oh, we got Micah exploding back onto the scene.
Man,
guys,
did
I
you
want to
see
show a
what I
couple of
sent
the
you?
weird other things.
How about
No, I
this
did
thing
not.
here? It's something y'all touched on but didn't use the name of as much.
Come on, swing it, Micah.
The Neural Engineering System Design Program, NESD. DARPA wants to develop an implantable system able to provide precision communication between the brain and the digital world. So, that's kind of, we're talking about those mice, that's probably all these little projects can be steps of a bigger project too,
And yeah, Elon Musk was talking about people just sending pictures to each other via your brain, and like you'd have infinite memory, like you'd have terabytes of memory, could play back your past like a video.
Well, he he suggested that humans would probably wouldn't be talking to each other anymore within 5 years, that we would be either telepathic or we've had some kind of brain link. And as you just said, Mike, I pulled it up, neural engineer system design, the Neuralink. So you got both the quote private sector like Elon Musk and them working on it. You have the DARPA using black budget taxpayer funded dollars to do it. And as I said, it's here, it's happening. This is, this technology is racing forward. I'm going to touch on a couple other points real quick, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
This symbol right here, Johnny, we were telling you about this before the show. I don't know how many of the listeners or the viewers remember the Office of Information, the Information Awareness Office, excuse me. And it was part of a program that was deemed total information awareness. This is in the days after 9/11. And for those who can see the visual on the screen, the logo for Information Awareness Office is literally a pyramid with an all-seeing eye on the top of it looking over the earth. And this is because they said that they wanted total information awareness. And I wrote this article a couple of years ago. I'm just going to kind of touch on how DARPA intersects with this. But in the days after 9/11, of course, we all know that they passed the Patriot Act. People were terrified and they were willing to let them do whatever. They also had things like national security letters and other forms of kind of violations of the constitutions and basic liberties. And at that time, they were starting to roll out license plates, cameras, stingrays, thermal imaging planes, all the stuff that we've seen in the last 20 years that have come from DARPA. They came as a result of 9/11. And one of those things was what we were just talking about, the Information Awareness Office in January 2002. So just 4 months after 9/11, 2001, DARPA launches the Information Awareness Office, which was to bring together several DARPA projects focused on using surveillance and data mining to track and monitor terrorists and other threats to U.S. national security. In November 2002, the New York Times reported that DARPA had developed a classified tracking program called Total Information Awareness, which was intended to detect terrorists by studying millions of pieces of data, including gathering and storing personal information from emails, social media, credit cards, phone calls, medical history, online history, all of this without the need for a warrant. And it also featured a biometric component as part of the FBI's biometric database, which, by the way, has continued to grow. Long story short, though, once this program was starting to be exposed to the public, and in fact, they realized it was being ran by a man named Vice Admiral John M. Poindexter, who was involved in the Iran-Contra affair, among other things, the public pushed back, and in 2003, Congress decided to defund the entire Information Awareness Office and the entire Total Information Awareness program. But it's been made pretty clear by now that in the days after that, they basically just broke up all the different programs and they renamed them. Edward Snowden showed how some of the programs that were involved in total information awareness were renamed and moved to different programs. Like this one was known as Genoa 2, was renamed Topsail and removed to a different department. And they did this with most of those things. So in the days after 9/11, DARPA was already suggesting a heavily surveyed monitor system for our world, and the people were not having it. And they did push back. Total Information Awareness ended, Information Awareness Office ended, but officially these things continued. And I would say most of us would say they haven't stopped in any way. And that's kind of why we're talking about this today. Whitney Webb put out a recent article that I'm going to just link to everybody and advise everybody to read themselves. It's just called "Coronavirus Gives a Dangerous Boost to DARPA's Darkest Agenda." And some of the programs that we've been talking about, the ones that Johnny went over, that DARPA's been working on since the 50s, are now being given, I guess, a new life, you could say, under COVID-19. Just as a quick example, DARPA has been involved in something called the Biological Technologies Office, which was created in 2014. And as of late, DARPA's human biology and biotech projects at its BTO office have been getting a massive boost thanks to the coronavirus, with recent reports even claiming that DARPA, quote, might have created the best hopes for stopping COVID-19. So you can kind of see now how DARPA is being planted as a hero here. They're talking about, of course, nanotechnology, something called a nano platform. There's so much going on, and we could just keep looking at headlines. Johnny, this one, Facebook teams up with DARPA to scan your brain and augment reality. DARPA mind control project revealed, leaked document back in 2013. I mean, there's just so much to go into when we're talking about DARPA. And I don't know where you guys want to take the conversation next, but what do you think about all that? I mean, how DARPA's kind of taken the lead again in some ways, Micah?
They got every advantage, right? And you know, I've got a couple of things I was looking at here, and you mentioned it briefly, talking about Elon Musk and stuff. They've got on DARPA's website themselves at DARPA.mil, military, right? They have DARPA's commitment to small business, you know, and they're speaking about. And if you think about it, entrepreneurs tend to be on cutting edge of things, industrial, academic, and otherwise, right? They're doing things in different ways. So it's interesting and makes sense that the philosophy of DARPA to think of new things would also, even though they were government bureaucrats and for some time, lead them to this, you know, start to try to collude with various businesses because, you know, you got to stay ahead. But I did see this other, we were talking about the different creations they have. And one thing I thought was interesting is this tissue integrated biosensor technology, Derrick. It says here, you know, basically that your body, as we all know, offers all kinds of feedback and, you know, it tells you about health, etc. And their idea is basically to implant tiny, soft hydrogel-based sensors under your skin, use them to measure biomarkers related to oxygen, glucose, lactate, urea, and ion levels. These sensors could stay in the body for up to 2 years and read out information direct to connected devices like smartphones. A consumer-facing version of the same technology one day could help individuals manage chronic diseases such as diabetes. And I just think it's important that we remember that technology means know-how. And as you said earlier, Derrick, yeah, you know, we believe in freedom. So if you want to put these things in your body and have your phone tell you more stuff about you, more power to you. But if you don't know how those things work and you don't know what all is being put in your body and where that information is going, I mean, I imagine there's all kinds of situations for this to be abused like that, you know, because I think our emotional states affect our body. It's been shown, neurotransmitters, things like that, that there's a lot more that can be developed once they can penetrate and get inside your body and start reading your biomarkers.
Yeah, I think the future is moving more towards, believe it or not, just combining people with machines and combining I don't know. It's just weird to think about that as the future. But in the next 10 years, I think we're going to see people starting with trying to cure things like strokes and bring back memory loss, using computer chips and using these readers. We already see that people love like Fitbit and things like that. So it could be, you know, advertised as a way to track your health. And there's a lot of positives and negatives that could come from it. But we all just need to make sure we're, you know, making our own decisions with it and not having it forced and include that as well as like with the surveillance technology they're coming out with, like the police dogs and things like that. Like we need to make sure that like, hey, are we comfortable with this? I'm not.
And it's coming now in the form of an army of contact tracers, right? We keep hearing this idea of and it's the same thing. They're using your smartphone, which we know, again, DARPA helped create the same technology. That technology came out to the masses. They've used it to track us. I mean, obviously, we've done great things with smartphones. We've streamed live from Standing Walk. We've, you know, been at the front lines of protests and done all kinds of great important things. But at the end of the day, I mean, I'm really starting to wonder, like, is there a point where we accept that perhaps for all the good these tools have been able to do, you know, they're ultimately in some way they're kind of imprisoning us as well. And I guess this is a question I want to pose to you guys and to the audience, everybody who's listening on Freethinker Radio here on 90.1 KPFT Houston and across our various channels. Is there a point for you? I mean, because it's clear, like you said, Johnny, this is the future that's coming into view. It's the technocratic state. It's the, you know, transhumanist. And again, we believe in bodily autonomy and freedom of choice. But what do you think about this? This is kind of, I guess, not a doomsday question, but more of a philosophical question. I had a friend pose this to me, and we're coming down to the last 5-10 minutes or so here. You go into a job interview, Johnny, and one guy has a camera in his eye that he's recently had implanted, the Neuralink or whatever, right? So he can tell them, hey, just insert the SD card of whatever work you need done right here into my brain, and you know, my body will download it and I'll be done with it in a minute, right? Or hey, I have a camera in my eye and you can see everything I do through the whole workday. So a friend of mine basically posed it to me like this, like, hey, if I go in there for that same job, they're going to hire you or me over you because I can show them a proven record of here's everything I do all day. Here's my work, you know, blah, blah. And so he's like, you're going to eventually get left behind. Now, I think we're going to see a fracturing of society where people who choose to opt out and who don't want the vaccines or don't want the machines or the chips or the Neuralink or whatever, because it's coming for entertainment purposes, for, tracking, for all kinds of things. People are going to create two different societies. But I don't know. What do you guys think about that? This idea that some of us might, quote unquote, be left behind by those who do choose to buy into the kind of upgrading their systems, I guess you could say. What do you think about all that?
I think that that's inevitable in some senses. It's also gonna, unfortunately, I usually don't take this argument, but I do think that class is gonna play a factor. Like people who are able to afford upgrades, or people who are able to afford these extra, what would you say, augmented reality states, or enhanced brain power and things like that. It could create more of a divide if you're bringing up your children, like, who are going to just be born into that. And so, like, our whole family is better. Or, like, we're getting into the editing of genes and things. We didn't really touch on that today. It doesn't have much to do with DARPA, but that's coming as well, So there are going to be different classes of people. And as far as, like, if there's going to be two different worlds of people who opt out, I already say, in a way, there kind of is. Like, people live on social media sometimes as it is now, and they don't do the things outside of their world, but now it's just going to be more focused and they're more obvious, I guess.
I think it might be like so many different technological things that we've seen come to be in the past. For example, electricity. Right now, if you don't have your house wired up with electricity and you have children, but don't you think CPS is going to come and say you're unfit? It's eventually going to be to the point where if you don't know where your kids are, like that eye thing, if you can't account for everything, there's a potential for danger. Therefore, you're not safe, unfit, dangerous, terrorist, etc. Quarantine your butt.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I want to put one of the comments on screen and just share it with everybody. We got JBet saying, sounds like the factions / groups that opt out stand the risk of being made near extinct. People got a lot to say, a lot of thoughts on this, of where we stand as a society and how we are going to maintain our humanity as we move forward into this somewhat machine age. I want to point out one or two more parts of this article from Whitney Webb, because it relates to everything we're dealing with coronavirus, to just kind of bring us full circle. We've been talking about DARPA here on Freethinker Radio today, and this really great article talks about how some of the vaccines that DARPA has been working on, and of course, whose name's going to pop up, but Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have been involved in funding too. These are what are known as RNA vaccines, which go down to the gene level, and are very controversial and that really haven't been tested that much, are being proposed now by Bill Gates and others as the potential solution. So we'll just dip into a couple of sentences here. That same year, DARPA began funding efforts to create multi-agent synthetic DNA vaccines that would be delivered into the human body via a non-invasive electroporation, and was quickly promoted in media reports as a way to quickly produce vaccines compared to traditional vaccine methods. This category of vaccine would involve the same type of synthetic DNA that DARPA has also researched for the purposes of both enhancing and subverting human beings at the genetic level. It was also this year, in 2010, that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation began heavily funding DNA and RNA vaccines. Coincidentally, DARPA and Bill and Melinda Gates looking into these same type of vaccines at the same time. DNA vaccines, which were first created in 2005, have never been approved for human use in the United States, and past studies have warned that they, quote, possess significant unpredictability and a number of inherent harmful potential hazards, and that there is, quote, inadequate knowledge to define either the probability of unintended events or the consequences of genetic modifications. So these are very controversial types of vaccines, but she's going through here and showing how since 2011, 2013, through a company called Moderna Therapeutics, DARPA funded them to the tune of $25 million to develop a synthetic RNA vaccine platform. And then there was another $45 million in 2015 to Innovia Pharmaceuticals. Some of you might know that name. These are also companies that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation do have investing in. And so, yeah, we're bringing us to this point where it's now like DARPA is here to save us. DARPA, the technocrats, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Elon Musks and the Bezos and the Zuckerbergs of the world are basically the heroes. And it's pretty crazy. I don't know, man. I'm not sure what to think about this world.
I read a comment over here from Matthew Blackman. He says, my kids said other kids had cell phones, and then the media used fear to stimulate, for call for safety, and they ended up getting a cell phone. It's basically what we were saying a little bit ago, but it's, one of the people here's experience. And I think if we're going to look at what's going to happen, look at what has happened, what they have done. How have they used the things in the past that they've developed? What purposes, what ends, what fruit?
Absolutely. Guys, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping this show up for 90.1 KPFT Houston Freethinker Radio. But if you happen to be watching, I think I can hang out for a couple extra 5 minutes after we close out with this song. And we want to get to some of these comments. We want to respond to you guys. And of course, we want to talk about solutions. We chose to do some of these themed episodes, and of course, to bring up something like DARPA and the truth about these things. But of course, we always want to talk about the solutions. And the solution is, for one, to be educated, to be informed, to be empowered, to build community, to come together and groups or as individuals that really are unplugging from these systems and thinking about solutions. So thanks to everybody at KPFT. We're going to go ahead and jump into this song. And if you're watching on the internet, we'll be right back in just a moment. Just give us a second to share this awesome music with you as we close out here for the radio show. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This is we're going to play some Krayze, guys. All right. Welcome back, guys. We're back.
We're back
We're back for Freethinker Radio here on Facebook, on YouTube. We are done with our recording for the radio. So guys, if you haven't figured out, we do an hour radio show here in Houston. So the first hour has to fit the radio and be good and for them. But we've got enough time before we all got to sign off for the night to just do a couple more comments or questions. I'm gonna go through these comments. So if anybody has anything they want to ask or thoughts, we'll share it with you guys. We'll share it with the audience. Thanks to everybody listening. What do you guys think, Micah, Johnny, just about the whole episode, DARPA, everything? I mean, are we fucked?
Were we ever not fucked?
Well, the thing is to remember that there's life going on, and all this stuff is.
Frozen.
Did we lose him?
Okay. What's happening?
You're there. We can hear you.
Nanotechnology in the vaccines.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. But I think it's a question.
That's a real concern. Yeah,
we have to. I'm sorry. We're talking about technology, which is in the end knowing how, right? We need to know how to do things too. We need to know how to reach people. We need to know how to see through some of this stuff. It's going to be very difficult because they're going to be used. Different arguments for the how do you call it, the good of these devices, because in the end it really is just know-how, right? They get a leg up because they get a whole bunch of funny money and they get all this stuff, and that gives them a leg up. We don't get that, so I think that's a bit rough, and obviously how they use it's a bit rough, and the fact that we'll all eventually succumb to some of it. I mean, all of us have the electricity on. All of us are on a computer right now. I don't know. I think it is, you can see the dystopic side, or you can just say, look, humanity's learning how to do these things. We better learn how to communicate. We better learn how to respect individual freedom and liberty in this. Otherwise, it's going to come down to the people who don't want it just being ran over, I believe. There is some hope that, there's something else. But I think the main thing is to let people understand, just like we have guns all over the place and people killing each other, the main thing is there's a lot of gun owners who aren't killing each other. So the point on this is it's technology. I don't believe we need to be afraid of understanding the laws of nature.
I think that, for me, I might one day be a crazy guy up in the woods living in, Montana, hiding out, end up being the next Unabomber, not actually bombing people, but in the sense of what he believed in. If you know anything about Ted Kaczynski and his views. Now, I don't embrace all of them, but I do sometimes, man, I'm kind of on the edge. Like, again, I like you said, Micah, technology is a tool. I believe that. But I also think that there are certain tools and certain switches that when you flip them, you can't just turn them off. I was just telling this to a friend earlier that, we are literally dealing with a situation where no tyrannical government in history has ever had the tools that these governments alive today have. They've never been able to dream of and have all this apparatus that they can use. And of course, we've never had the tools at our disposal at the same time. But I do think that at some point, man, it's a very tight race between the good and the bad technology that at some point, maybe some of these anti-civilization theorists are right in the end, and that there might be some level of technology that is just destined to doom humanity. I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing shit out there, but what do you think, Johnny?
Just like the yin yang, man, whenever something becomes too much, it's got to kind of implode on itself. It's going to go one way or the other, I guess.
I think the problem
I probably would end up, wanting to get more away from it. Like, I don't really like the idea of augmented reality all the time and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we're just going to be the old people, kind of like, oh, yeah, kids in your crazy projections that you have on your eyeballs and things like that.
We definitely are, dude.
No, like I see a lot of issues with censorship. I see a lot of issues with the combining of censorship and that technology. So like, is it really going to be free, or are we going to have our own firewall like China, where even if you have this chip, you still can't go like places they don't want you to go with it? And is it ever going to really replace things like natural sources of introspective so without getting into it right here, you know, whatever DMT and things like that, like that's completely opposite realm. Someone mentioned shamanism earlier, so that's kind of what I was thinking about.
I want to add real quick to what you're saying, Johnny, as far as, you know, this world that's coming on, man. Like I really do worry that, like I was just saying a moment ago, that there won't be any way for us to go back once it goes forward. I do think that there will always, people who want freedom are going to find a way to be free. Like without a doubt, 100% humans who want to be free will figure out how to be free. Now, that does not mean that the masses will be free, you know, because as we've seen, most of the masses go along to get along. They just follow whatever is happening right in front of them. But the people who truly desire to be free, I do think that we're going to have to find ways to opt out and avoid. And you know, Johnny, with the contact tracing shit already, they're already basically saying, like, you know, if you don't do contact tracing and you're not shown to be healthy and free or whatever else, you're not going to be able to go back to work. You're not. So they're going to use the social engineering to get this technology in there. I mean, that's the crazy thing is, they're saying that, well, the coronavirus has shown that we can't have school the same. I've seen so many articles the last couple of days. Here's how coronavirus will change office spaces. Here's how it's going to change travel. Here's how it's going to change schooling.
I've seen that people writing articles, mosh pits will never be the same. And
oh God,
I'm gonna mosh. They're not gonna stop my pit.
Well, there's
only if you're wearing a mask.
Yeah, you're gonna have to require masks. You can only have 2 people in the pit at a time.
Early on, Derrick, you said a word. You said a word that I thought we should maybe take a moment to think about. You said civilization, you know, and anti-civilization theorists. And I'd like to make a little distinction within the word civilization, because, you know, once we quit being civil, once our government and once our systems quit being civil to one another, to each other, to the system, what we end up with is more like being colonized by the powers. And we are called a civilization, but we're not really a civilization. The only culture we have is pop culture. You know what I'm saying here? We're not a civilization. We're not building something forward. We have almost like the rulers, the elite, and if you don't believe that, if you think we are all still equal before the law, these bailouts ought to show you how we're not. I mean, so I think that that's something to think about, because I don't believe that humans have to, that it's necessary that we go this route, that there could be other options.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're predestined to go this way. I just think we have some fucking psychopaths, dude, that I do believe also, Johnny, yin and yang and the Tao and everything, that there's a piece of these people, the powers that which they were, that is in all of us. I think we all have the potential to become tyrants. We've talked about this before, Micah, and, you know, in the wrong position, maybe go that way.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't think it's set out to go this way necessarily, but I do think that in the current trajectory that we're in, unless human beings all of a sudden, I saw somebody mention a great awakening earlier, unless that happens within the next, you know, good year or two, it's going to be pretty difficult to see how things can turn around. And we got some interesting comments. I believe the mark of the beast is a frequency, not a microchip.
Nice.
That could be true. I just wanted to kind of comment. Someone was talking about, I'm hoping for the return of the underground and the warehouse raves. I thought it was also funny. Someone said Flare. I haven't heard that in a long time. But
peace, love, unity, respect.
I've been thinking that might be one good thing that does come out of this eventually, because as we're reopening, you know, smaller events and things like this, as opposed to larger touring bands and maybe touring art. I don't know how art galleries work, but it's going to give opportunity to support your local artists more than ever. Like once things do start opening up, and there's going to be less commercial things touring around to go see, so you can maybe go to your local theater or go to your, I don't know, you know, make more friends.
I want to share, Johnny, guys, with Shelly. I just put it on screen for those who are watching. My work is requiring me to wear a mask for 30 minutes that I'm there to clean tables. I want to not comply, but also don't want to have confrontation about it either. And this is what I'm saying, not to pick on you, Shelly, at all, your choices, but these are the real world decisions that people need to think about. Yep. When they tell you, you can't work without that vaccine, you can't work without that mask, you can't work without the contact tracing app. What are you going to do? I mean, if you have no other means of surviving, you're going to comply out of just necessity, unless you've got, you know, a piece of land or a friend, you know, circle, whatever. Like, it's going to be very difficult.
I'm really appreciative of Shelley for putting that there, because that's how it is. Like I was speaking about electricity back in the day. This is how they get you. It's it's insidious. It's around us every day. And now we've seen recently with all that extended unemployment, et cetera, that some of these states like Ohio have set up a call and tell on your employees if they don't want to take the job back. And I'm thinking that, the reason I'm going there is this is the same thing, right? Yeah. Like, you're not going to get your extended unemployment in this situation. So that puts even more pressure on these people to comply. And, here we are in a really bad economic time, cranking it up even worse. So I do think what we're talking about education, self-empowerment, reflection on who we are and what we need, like we need to get technologically ahead is what I'm saying. Not with robots and all that, though we could use some robot gardeners, but more like, what do we need to know how to do to make the world the way we want it, the future we want? The same thing DARPA is doing, we need to do. We need to appropriate the mission of these people and make it towards our purposes individually and with our friends. So I'm thinking that's something we try to do here.
Good point.
Yeah, Johnny, we were talking, I guess I'll mention it since while we're on here live. For those who are listening and watching and haven't joined the Freedom Cells Network website, whether you are just an individual who's just looking to meet another like-minded person or just curious what people are up to, I do recommend checking out freedomcells.org. And anybody who's in Houston, I do have people occasionally reach out and email me from Houston looking to connect. I'm not there now, but Johnny and Micah are, and Micah's not always the most friendly people person, but sometimes he can be, and Johnny is a good help. So reach out. This is the time for us all to collaborate, because let's just be real about it. At the end of the day, when the shit hits the fan, if it hits even worse than it is now, we're going to have to get to a point where our petty differences or insecurities or our hangups, they might have to just say, you know what, I got to put that shit aside to survive. You know what I mean? Like, we might come to that very real thing, like, oh, I'm not a people person, but I got to survive. I would say we are there.
I've been thinking along those lines a lot more, man, because we always were. I think like last week, I was just getting really caught up in comment sections, going back and forth, and like I was even telling these guys about it. Just, I guess, like everyone, there's so much contradicting evidence. Everyone wants to just go and give each other homework and stuff, but like the fact is, like, you could spend your time arguing, or we could be working together as a community to, share vegetables, or try to build other systems. Like, I was thinking about doing a garage sale for people who have lost their jobs and things like that, just setting up other community events that could benefit everybody. And regardless of where you think the virus came from, or whether you think we're all going to get nano chipped and all that stuff, we can still do these things to help each other. We can still go out and feed the homeless, and we can still do these community events. So I'm going to focus more on that than arguing.
Yeah, man. And I think that, Johnny, like, that's something that people want more than ever. Like, people really, I was showing you guys earlier, the Freedom Cell Network is exploding. I've got people emailing, looking for, like, even if they're not wanting to come to Mexico where I'm at, they're looking for solutions. And I think it's because with all this shit happening right now, people are finally like, hey, what were those guys talking about, getting to know myself or building the garden, or, whatever it may be. And they're really starting to think about these types of solutions and what we might need to do. Micah, this comment kind of goes towards something that we've talked about over the years. Misuchi Miss says we need to take over / invest in an old abandoned town or village and make it prosperous. There are a lot of rundown little towns. And I have worked with people who've talked about this. There's a movement called One Small Town Movement or something along those lines. And Micah, you've mentioned this before about little towns in Texas where we could go there and make ourselves the sheriff and the local officials and basically try to carve out one little free haven. And I think that those are valuable ideas.
Yeah, I think they are, and I think it's
important.
I'm
gonna show you guys one thing.
It's important to have ideas like that, even if you can't get to them right away, to have some sort of other alternative in view. And there are lots of opportunities. And these little towns, they are in a sense off the radar, right? They're on the radar in the fact that as soon as you really do something, you can end up on the news. But at the other time, they're off the radar. You can live differently. They don't care because there's not many people. In a place that's got 5 million people, they're going to shoot you for being on your knees. I'm just joking.
Wow. This guy, Justice Brianna says, here in Northern California, if you go to the store, they have signs where you wait in line and you have to cover your mouth and nose. Somebody also asked just how things are in Mexico. I think I covered this a little bit, but where I'm at in Mexico, masks are not mandatory. Some stores are starting to require them, but you can go out about. I mean, it's funny. We were just talking about this earlier today. In Mexico, there's a bunch of announcements that happen throughout the day. People walk around saying tamales, they're selling things. So you just constantly hear people yelling and saying things on the speaker. And those people who are out there selling their tamales and selling their food, their announcement is louder than when the cops drive around in their little parade saying, please stay inside, please wash your hands, please wear a mask. Nobody even pays attention. Nobody listens. Like, people are out, people are going about their business. And it's just, I'm even noticing more shops start to open up where I'm at. But I guess I wanted to show you guys one more thing while we kind of wrap up, unless any of the commenters have anything else to say. This is maybe a little bit more of a lighthearted story, a funny story that actually happened in Houston related to this whole mask thing. Let me see if I can get it to open up. You guys remember seeing Channel 2 run a program saying that you could wear a bandana, you could wear a scarf, you could wear these different things as part of your mask. Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just like a basic, I can't get this thing to open up, sorry. It was just like a basic graphic that said, these are acceptable forms of wearing masks. And one of them was supposed to be bandana. However, instead of it saying bandana, it said banana. And a bunch of people made memes, like taping banana peels to their face. And we've seen somebody use an avocado for a mask out here. I mean, it's pretty.
Wow. I guess that might be about it, huh? I do appreciate everybody that stayed with us afterwards. We had a couple of other articles we would have got into. I had one that I thought was interesting. They're saying that people in Hong Kong, we know all the trouble they've been through. There've been the riots and now the COVID, and that kind of got them off the news, right? But now they're saying people are becoming ill with rat hepatitis in Hong Kong for the first time ever, and no one understands how it's happening. So, I had a good show tonight, everyone. I hope you had a good time, Johnny. I know you had some good information to get out.
Yeah. Thanks for ending on the rat hepatitis.
Yeah, it was just two positive bananas on the faces and stuff. Now y'all go to sleep.
We love you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody who thumbs up, shares, comments. You make it live. Makes us want to work harder each week. So we'll see you next week. And we'll tune in Friday at KPFT 3 to 5 or 3 to 4 to hear the music and the earlier part of the show if you missed it. And thank you much. Peace, Johnny.
Later.
I'm out of here.